What's up, guys? Welcome to another new episode. In this episode, we are going to talk about the structuring in JavaScript. And in JavaScript, we can do the structuring in array and objects. So, in order to understand how the structuring works in JavaScript and also grab some tricks that I'm quite sure will help you in your day-to-day programming, let's go through some few examples that I've put in place for us to use in order to understand the depth of what the structuring really is. So let's start with objects. Here we have a person object, and the person object has a name, hyper, as the first name, and the last name is developer. Just a hyper developer, the name of channel, you know that. So here we are trying to like log out these names, and here it will give you the hyper, and this here it will give you a developer. And there's really nothing wrong with this way of assessing the properties from this object. But if we can really look deep into it, like you have to try to say person dot first name and all this kind of stuff, it is kind of a lot of things to deal with. If we run it like this, you can see here we have hyper and here we have developer and all this kind of stuff. But it is kind of like a long way to deal with. So how can we solve this problem when it comes to destructuring? So with destructuring, okay, let's say we're using destructuring here. Destructuring. With destructuring, we are going to say let, okay? Then we'll directly say first name and last name, okay? Whoa, okay. Last name, like that. And we'll just like set it to the person object, like that. Let's first comment this one. And now we have two variables, which is the first name and the last name. Before even we run it, let's just come down here and say console dot long. We have the first name and the last name, right? So okay, like this, if we run it, it is going to give us hyper developer, just like what actually we expressed here. So that is actually good, that is actually good. And if we can look at these two examples, like to compare the traditional way of how we would have did the same thing and with the structuring, you can clearly see that with the structuring it is too easy. Because here actually I just like try to consolate and all this kind of stuff, but I did mention some things like suppose if I'm to write a variable and set that variable to this value and another variable set it to this value, then after this I try to like log it or maybe use it anywhere that I want to use it. That is actually how complex objects can be when we are not using things like structuring. So this is our first example, and I'm quite sure like you quietly understand why the structuring is really important and why you should add it in your JavaScript arsenal. Here in this example, we're using the same object. But one thing that changed is this. Like in this object, we have first name, we have last name. But you know so well we don't have middle name. Okay? There's no middle name. But we actually wrote a middle name here anyway, without even having our own middle name, we write a middle name here. So if we are to run this, it is going to give us undefined as the value of this middle name. I know like if you are using other programming languages, it will directly yell at you, but JavaScript has a different approach to that, you know, has a different approach to that. Now, for example, suppose if you say middle name here, and this is taking us to another lesson, okay? And we give it a name, like suppose the middle name has to be John, like that, and we run the same thing, now going to give us John here. But one thing we need to understand is this is now called how to set a what? A default value when you are dealing with objects object destructuring in JavaScript. This is how you set a default value. Imagine suppose you don't have that value here, but you want that value to be among the values that you are destructuring from the person object. You see? So this is how you can actually deal with it. And dealing with it this way, it is kind of like easy for you to access it. Now like this, you have a variable called middle name with a value called John, right? But up here, you have nothing like that. So here, let's say, suppose here we have age, or let's just call it current age, okay? And that current age, we set it to 18. That is the current age. Then here we'll say middle name. No, we already have middle name, but let's just say middle name and say our middle name here is called Joseph. Okay, Joseph like that. That is it. Our middle name is Joseph, and the current age is this. Now we come down here instead of we have this middle name here, right? Our middle name now is not going to display undefined, so let's just remove this comment. And now let's say suppose we need current age, okay? But instead of getting it as current age, we want to get it as age. How can we do that? Current age is just kind of long. So let's just come here and say current age as age, okay? Let's get it as age like that. Then it will definitely give us what the current age really is. Then we run it. Now it is going to give us Joseph, and the age here is going to be 18. What if we come here and set a value, okay, for that specific age? Let me say we increase it to 25 and we run this. Still it is giving us 18. What is happening? Actually, what this code is trying to show us is that, like, the properties which are inside this object are having high precedency compared to the variable that we actually use and destructed down here. When it comes to these properties, their values are always there no matter what. I know setting a default value are good to help in situations where like you may not get that specific value that you want, then the default value will help. But in this context, if you can see here, like the properties which are inside this person object are having high precision compared to this. In order for us to get what exactly we want, then the easy way of doing it is like suppose you come to middle edge here and remove this middle edge from here, then the default value will actually work with it. But without removing it, it is impossible for it to work. You see? Now, like this, you are now getting John instead of getting Joseph up there. So that is like the difference, and this is how you can deal with default values when it comes to like object destructuring in JavaScript. In this example, we are going to see like how can you use spread syntax, or let me say REST operator in your object when dealing with destructuring arrays and destructuring objects in JavaScript. So in this example, okay, for example, suppose we have a car object and the car has the name, has model, speed, and color, right? So we only need the name. Suppose we only need the name, but we also don't want to ignore the model, speed, and color. So we want to also display them, but we are not going to give each having their own variable. One thing that really we are serious about is the name of that specific car, so to speak. So, okay, with the structuring, the way we are going to actually deal with this is going to be like this. Suppose we'll say let name, okay, which is the car name up there. Then after this, we'll just say dot dot dot. Then we'll say rest details, okay. The rest of the details of the car will just be said let's rest details like this. And now you set this to car object like that. Now, if we are to console this out, okay, we are to console this and say name, then after this we say ref details like that, details, yeah, like that, and you run this, we are going to see that it is going to give us Lambo, which is actually the name here, and the model, speed, and everything will be displayed as objects, okay, as objects altogether. And if you can see the inside of this, like this REST operator is actually helping a lot because like now you have access to see all of these things, okay. Now, for example, like if we are to come here and say like rest of the details done, then we give a name like suppose model, right? Like that, and we try to see what will it display. It is displaying exactly the model of that car, you see. Now, which means you can actually use this in many ways. For example, like if you want to display this name in this specific page and you plan to like take the model speed and the color to another page as prompt, but instead of like destructuring them all one by one, you actually want to just take them as a random data one so that when you reach there you can be able to destructure them. It will actually be very easy for you to deal with that, you know. It is a kind of a very nice way of dealing with it. That's why like if you have to come here, just go deep into that and like say write details like that and go deep into it and start writing out the specific variables, you see. You start writing out the specific variables, then after this you name this variable to be ref, then you can get the same thing, you know, you can get the same output, so to speak. So that is like one thing that I see is easy and powerful at the same time when it comes to dealing with the structuring objects in JavaScript. So this is it about combination of REST operator and the structuring when we are dealing with objects in JavaScript. In this example, we are actually going to work with a function, okay, that returns object or null in some situation, for example. So now we have this object, it returns null at that moment, but it's still because like it returns object or null, so we are trying to destructure, okay? We are trying to destructure name, the first name and the last name from the get person function, which is actually up here. So here then after this is console the first name and the last name. But if we run this, we're actually going to see like we have a type error. Like it says the structure property first name of get person, whatever it is inside there as it is null. So it can't like destructure that property because like it is giving null. That is actually what it is pointing out. Now if you like get this kind of error, or maybe let me say you're working with data that you are actually getting from online, and suppose you want to use it to do something, you try to destructure it like that, but this is exactly what happened, then I think there are a couple of ways that you can be able to resolve that. If it is the application that like you cannot be able to leave users completely with nothing, then maybe you can come here, okay, and try to give empty object to give object which actually has something inside, or else you just leave it empty like this. By doing so, you are trying to tell, okay, you are trying to tell your program that, okay, if this operation is true, then display it. But if it is false, which actually with null will be false, then just display for me the empty object. You see. Now if we are to run it, it is not going to yell at us again. It is just going to say undefined, undefined, which is actually identifying the first name and the last name. With this, you can handle this problem. So in this example, we are going to work on how to destructure a nested object. And I'm quite sure like you have ever come across this kind of objects many times. Because when it comes to data, like mostly we format our data in form of objects, but we have first name, last name, age, something like the details of the user mostly comes like objects, a person object having this property, having that property, having that property. And we use those kind of data in our day-to-day applications without a talking. But what if you come through a situation whereby like you have a nested object inside. How can you like use the structuring which I'm quite sure with these few examples you're already convinced as a person who is willing and is starting to use this very nice feature. How can you like structure this? So we have some few solutions that we can be able to use when it comes to this kind of situation. The first that I actually prefer is that here, the easy way that we are going to actually structure this is by also structuring it in a nested way. What do I mean by that? Okay, suppose let me say we say let here, we need the name, right? Then we first have to say name, then after this we say first name, okay? Then we say last name, like that. Then we set all these to student object, just like that. Now, when we come down here, console, dot log and we say first name, okay, and last name like that. Now if we run this, we are going to see that it is actually giving us the first name and the last name. Mike Mike Tyson, which is which here actually Mike is the first name and the Tyson is the second name. So like you can actually see how this thing works. But even more, like here, if I can ask you how many variables we have, maybe you will say three, but the truth is we have only two variables. The reason is because this name here is not being treated as variable again. It is existence is even ignored completely, like it didn't exist. Then if you are to just come here, down here, and let me say name, just like that, and try to run it, it is definitely going to throw error like that. Now, what is this error saying? Reference name is not defined. But you will say, what? But I just defined name here. This name is being treated as the one which sets the alias to the first name and the last name. And it is not being treated as a variable. That's why it is throwing for us this error because it doesn't exist. So in order for you to get the name object, you need to come after this and just say name here. Okay. Then if you like try to run it, now you will see everything printing here, which means Mike Tyson and first name is Mike and last name is Tyson. That is actually how it is. And yeah, that is it about this example. In this example, we are going to actually talk about the structuring function arguments. Like you will have a function, okay, which in our case here is this arrow function here, which actually takes in person as the parameter, and after this, then you're trying to assess the properties inside this person object, so to speak. Here we say person dot first name and person dot last name, so to speak. And those are the things, those are the properties that actually we need from the person object. So our function here, okay, is assessing this. But if we are really to look deep into this is like the old way approach. Before even ES6 existed, this is how we actually used to like write this kind of code. But how can we make this better when it comes to ES6 and with the handy knowledge of the structuring? First thing first is this, okay? Instead of us saying person here, we just have to mention direct first name, okay, and the last name, like that. So here, instead of saying person dot something, we just remove this, and instead of saying person dot something, we also remove this. Then now we are only going to display direct, like from here we just like get this specific variable, which is the first name, and the specific variable, which is the last name, instead of saying person or something, you know. And if we really run this thing, it will give us the same output, just like if we left it like the old way. Now, if we click here and try to see what the output is, obviously it is going to print for us nothing. We didn't even like console it down here, but let's do that. Console the long instead of long. Okay, that's that. If we run it, it is going to give us like minus 10. You see, it's now giving us my Kenny, like my first name, last name Kenny. So it is actually similar, but let's try to compare the difference between these two approaches. Between these two approaches, you can clearly see like this approach is more precise and short compared to this approach, which is really lengthier. And sometimes, if you are not someone who really like have the depth knowledge of it, you can easily forget how to deal with these things. Like you need some dot first and all this kind of stuff in order to access this thing. It is kind of a little bit tiresome, but yeah, this is it, you know. And with this, I'm quite sure like you have the full understanding of how you can deal with the structure in JavaScript when it comes to objects. Like you have objects literally everywhere. Everything you are working with objects is there. Okay, especially if you're working on building a real life application, you have to really understand how objects work. And yeah, with this knowledge of destructuring, I'm quite sure like it will help you to excel your knowledge, your understanding of JavaScript more advanced, and it will also help you like to be able to handle some complexity where necessary. So that is it about object destructuring in JavaScript. So let's start with array destructuring in JavaScript. Here we have a simple example. Okay, we have array which actually has 1, 2, and 3 as the content of its element. So how can we use destructuring in this kind of simple program? Okay, if we are supposed to use it in our old school fashion, okay, the first thing is this. Suppose I will have just said, okay, let x equal to array 0. One thing that really you need to understand in JavaScript array, like we use indexes. And indexes, as you know, it starts from 0, 1, 2, and now what I actually mentioned here is I want the element which is in position 0. And when I say position 0, I actually mean this one. Okay, so not only this, like if we are to take this a little bit to another level, this is y and z. Okay, and here we'll have 1, and here we'll have 2. As you know, like typical computer count from 0, 1, 2, 3. It's not like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, something of that kind. No, it counts from 0. Now, if we are to console this, I almost run it without canceling. So console, let me say x, y, and z, like that. And if we run this, we'll see that it will give us 1, 2, and 3, just like that. Okay, and this is actually showing us this content up here. I'm not blaming this approach. This is actually a good approach. Okay, this is what we have been doing with JavaScript all these years before ES6 was there. Okay, we are actually even enjoying it. We love it. It is actually one of the good approach also for us during those days. But with ES6, doing something like this is kind of headache. Like completely headache. You can't really like be able to see yourself doing this while you have like this abundance of everything that you can easily deal with. So that's why like when it comes to ES6 support, we will replicate the same thing. Like let me say we'll say let here. But instead of giving a specific variable one by one like that, we will just put all of them together. Okay, in this open and closing bracket. Okay. So, like, suppose we say A, B, and C, like that. Okay. Then now we just set it to array, and this is actually what makes it completely simple. because now when we come down here, like we'll just say console.log A, B, and C. You see? Now if we run this one, we're going to get similar results. You see? Now this is the upper whatever, this one here, okay? And this one is the one which actually we use destructuring, you see? And with destructuring, one thing that you have to notice is this. It kills out all of this complexity, which means this code is deleted when it comes to destructuring. We don't need all this, right? So now, like with omitting this, it actually removes like 3 lines of code out of what we actually did. We have just like this is specific statement where like we initialize that specific thing, we destructure out of that array, and after this we just console it done. Okay, so that is how powerful you can be able to use destructuring when it comes to arrays in JavaScript. And let's go forward to another example. So in this example, actually, we are going to dive in a little bit to understand in depth what is really happening underneath the hood. Just like the example I gave earlier, in this side we have array here, okay? We have array here. Then the array is pointing to this, right? So what is actually happening underneath the hood is this. It is like when we use the structuring, it is like we are saying let like this. Remember from the last example I said A, B, and C like that. And now I'm setting it to 1, 2, and 3. You see? Which means the value of A will be 1, value of B will be 2, and value of C will be 3. You see? It actually works in a very systematic fashion. And this actually brought us to a very, very, very important point here, which is our next example. Here, the reason I'm saying it is very, very important point for us to understand is this. Here, like many interviewers can easily ask you, okay? Many interviewers can easily ask, okay, here you have two variables, like suppose name one and name two, and you are expected to swap the name without using a temporary variable. Okay, like suppose you have to swap the place of name one to name two and name two to name one, and to make sure that instead of them appearing like Michael and Jacob downward, like suppose Michael and Jacob downward, it has to appear Jacob and Michael has to be downward. Like that is one interview that mostly disturbs a lot of developers. But yeah, this is the time that you really need to focus because you gotta understand this trick. When it comes to destructuring, what we do is this: we just come here and destructure name one and name two. Then instead of giving it like name one suppose in this place and name two here, that will actually make it as usual, we are actually going to change this to the name 2 and this has to be name 1. And what's the difference about that? The thing is, now we have already swapped this thing, okay? We have already swapped the name. Now, if we are to like click on run here and try to see, you can see here now Jacob is coming first and Michael is second. You see, the reason is because of what we just did here. And this is actually the easy way you can evade that interview question, or let me say, you can be able to solve that interview question. And as I explained in our last example, what actually is underneath the hood is this. Like this name one, okay, will be assigned direct to name two here, and this name two will be assigned direct to name one here. This side here is the one acting like a variable, so you don't need to worry about anything. If you say name one here, it actually pulls this. If you say name two, it pulls the other one. Then on pulling these two, these ones are pointing to these ones also systematically as I illustrated earlier. So this gives it ability to be able to like, okay, what is here in this variable? It is actually Jacob. What is here in the other variable? It is Michael. So you pick those two names and use them in order like to display something like this. And with this, you have already like successfully answered your interviewer in a very, very right way. So this is another example, and in this example, like I'm going to show you how to skip a specific element when it comes to arrays, because I'm quite sure like you have ever come across maybe a lot of arrays you're working with, but you don't know, okay, how can I skip that value and only print that? Like suppose we have name John, Paul, and Kenny, and the only name you actually don't want to see there is Paul. But how can you do that? Like how can you evade that specific name so that the name Paul will not appear? When it comes to destructuring, it is quite easy for you to do that. You can just come here and put comma as if you're going to write another name, then put comma again. By doing so, now this space is left empty, you see? And by leaving this space empty, it means like this is supposed to be name two, which is going to be this name, but now this name is being like skipped, like completely obstructed out. And these two commas are actually showing these two commas in this end and the other end. You see? So now if we run this like this, it is going to show us only those two names, which is John and Kenny. You see? And the good thing about this is that like if you have data that I specified and you want to like skip some of those data, you can be able to use the structuring, and yeah, you will easily do that, and you will get the results you really admire. And for example, suppose if we continue putting this, like we also add another comma here and try to run it, you're going to see that you're going to have undefined for the value of name 3. The reason is because now by going 3 times like this, which means now we have like two. We have this, which is for this name here, and we have the other one, which has taken the position of the other name also here. So that is actually how it is. So, okay, let's go to our next example. This is actually our last example, so to speak. And in this example, we are trying to see how we can be able to use the structuring and spread syntax, or let me say spread operator in JavaScript array. And seriously, I know sometimes you can ask questions, okay, why do I really need the spread operator? Or maybe let me say, why do I need to spread through many other arrays instead of just displaying them? These things are like sometimes maybe you may have a specific array that you just need to display that specific value of that array, but the rest of the values you just want all of them just to be there, but not to mention a specific one, so to speak, when you're working with this structure in an array. So this is actually how you have to deal with it. Suppose here we have all these names, but the only name you actually wanted to point out is the first name. And don't mind me writing name 0. You can actually just say name, or you can say anything that your mind comes with, or anything that comes into your mind that you want to call that variable. You just call that variable that, and it will still display the data that you want. Then for this one also, you can name it anything, but I just say rest here, and that is it. And this dot 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 here, this is actually called spread operator when we are working with JavaScript. I'm quite sure like if you don't really understand much how this spread operator works, you can check it out in you can just open your browser and check it out and see how like it is working and everything about it. So yeah, if we run this specific code, now we are going to see like we have Michael, which is the only name taken out. Now the rest of the name are just spread upon. We have Jacob, Peter, Khalid, Kenny, and the names are not now given in aspect of how we expect them to be. All the names are being printed, but not in the fashion of what we thought it should be. Like it just pulled the entire array with the names and put it there. That is exactly what's happening. So, for example, if we change our mind, okay, we also need Jacob to be out, then we'll say name one, which is directly going to point at Jacob. And now, if we are to like go down here and try to say name one, obviously it is going to print Jacob. Okay. Okay, I forgot to put comma here. So let's run it again. So like this, it is going to put now Michael and Jacob, but starting from Peter, Khalid, and Kenny will be there. They will just be displayed as a way of names, you know. And one thing that really you need to understand when working with spread operators is that like this spread operator always comes in the end as the end variable. Like when you have a specified variables that you want to extract first as a like separate things, you first have to extract them before you use this dot something. Because if you put it in the middle or in the first there, in the beginning there, then like it will just throw error because based on the rules it is supposed to be used in the end. You know, that is actually how the rule is. And I'm quite sure like the time we were talking about destructuring an object, I'm quite sure like you heard some few things about it and I highlight the same thing. So it works both like in objects and in a way it does the same thing. It has no difference. So yeah, that is it, and that this actually brought us to the end of this episode. With this knowledge and this understanding, I'm quite sure you'll be ready to thrive out there with your JavaScript knowledge and be able to do a lot of things. So, as usual, see you in the next video, and thank you for watching. See you.